Good evening and welcome once again to another program of Issues in the News, where we discuss the important events taking place in our country. And as usual, I want to take this opportunity to say good night to all those viewers who are joining us in West Coast Berbice, on the Quarantine Coast, New Amsterdam, East Berbice, those who are joining us from Freedom Radio on Rob Street, those who are joining us right across the length and breadth of Guyana, and also in the Caribbean, North America, and further afield. Welcome once again to another program of Issues in the News. And as you know, in Guyana, you never run out of news. On any given night, on any given week, there are so many important issues that arise for discussion. You normally run out of time rather than run out of issues to speak about. This evening, it is no different. So, you would have seen in the news the story dominating about a default judgment, and I want to emphasize that word, a default judgment obtained by Annette Ferguson against Vice President Bharat Jagdeo. This judgment was served on Mr. Jagdeo today. Today, the judgment was served by a marshal of the High Court. And this judgment stems from proceedings that were filed by Ms. Ferguson since January of 2020. It was filed in January 2020, suing Mr. Jagdeo for libel. The Times newspaper was also sued. And at the time when the proceedings commenced, they were injunction proceedings that were also filed, along with a claim for damages. The injunction proceedings, as is the norm, was heard early, meaning in the month of January, February. Mr. Jagdeo handed those proceedings to me, and I was instructed to defend them. There were several hearings held in the High Court in relation to the injunction. And that application for the injunction was dismissed eventually. I filed, so I was on record, I appeared before a judge. On more than one occasion, I filed what is called the requisite affidavit for Mr. Jagdeo, and I was ordered to file legal submissions, which I did as well in writing. So no court can claim that Mr. Jagdeo was unrepresented. I was there at every hearing in the injunction proceedings. I filed the affidavits that were required to be filed in accordance with the time frame allowed for the filing of those affidavits. And when I was ordered to file written submissions of law, I did so. A date was fixed and we had oral arguments. And the judge dismissed the applications for the injunctions and upheld all my legal arguments. In those legal arguments, I presented a case for Mr. Jagdeo in which Mr. Jagdeo relied upon the defense of justification and fair comment. The alleged libel related to certain statements that Mr. Jagdeo made at a press conference in which he made some allegations about Annette Ferguson and her house lots, and made some allegations about Annette Ferguson and her employment at the Guyana Post Office. And those were the subject of the libel suit. And I was able to persuade a judge with legal arguments that an injunction should not be granted in those circumstances. And the judge upheld my submissions and dismissed the application that was made for injunctive reliefs. That happened around the 24th of February 2020. That is just 1 week before the 2020 elections, which were held on the 2nd of March. Now, as you know, Mr. Jagdev was the leader of the opposition. He is the head of the PPP list of candidates. He is also General Secretary of the People's Progressive Party. I am a candidate. I was a candidate at those elections. I was also a leader and still am a leader of the People's Progressive Party. I was and still is the main legal advisor to the People's Progressive Party. I was the party's assistant chief election scrutineer. Between myself and Mr. Jagdev, we had an extremely heavy workload during that period. This is the time, 1 week before the elections, when that defense was supposed to be filed. We were engaged in battling with GCOM to get enough polling places, to get our polling agents properly certified, our counting agents properly certified, our election agents properly certified. We had to, and everything was a battle. It was during that time that we discovered that they did not allocate sufficient polling places to PPP stronghold areas, and that required me to personally go on the east coast of Demerara and other places in Region 4 with a team from APNU and a team from GCOM, and spent whole days, sometimes way into the night, into the villages so that we can explain to the GCOM staff the distances that voters had to travel to vote or walk to vote. I remember you had one polling place in Monrepo, and Monrepo had about 8,000 voters. We had to go to the back of Fowles in Enmore. We had to go to Paradise on the east coast of Demerara. We had to go in various places to fight, virtually to fight to get enough polling places so that voting could have taken place in an orderly manner. Then in addition to that, you are campaigning every day. You're a different part of the country. Every night you are speaking at some meeting. During the day you're meeting observers. You have to do press briefings. You have to go on the ground to ensure that your political activists are doing their work. You have to ensure that all the polling agents, you have enough polling agents for each polling station, that you have backup polling agents in case one does not turn up, and all the preparations, meals for election day, you had rallies were still going on. All these things we were doing at the same time. And as a result, the time for filing that defense slipped us. In fact, the defense was prepared and it is in the file at my office, but through inadvertence, it was never filed due to the circumstances I have just outlined. Then when the election came, and after elections day, it became even more torturous because we then had to battle with Mingo, rushing to court to get court orders preventing Mingo from declaring wrong results, then getting him to use the statements of poll, dealing with the press, being every day in Ashmin's building from morning till night, then going to court, dealing with the international community, going on television every night to talk about this, to highlight what was going on, going to court repeatedly. All of this was taking place, and then during March month itself, the pandemic came, where the judiciary was shut down, lawyers' offices were closed, the registry was closed and was not accepting document. The country had ground to a virtual standstill. All time frames were expanded and extended to file court proceedings. There are still documents from that period that are being filed now because there was an accumulated amount of work. Then, even after, in fact, it was only the election matters that the court was opening to hear or sitting to hear. Only election matters. And even when the court began to work on a periodic basis, someone started a rumor that I contracted COVID and that I had COVID. And as a result, the court were not even hearing me. And the courts were not accepting documents from my office. And the registry was not accepting documents from my office. We had to endure that too. And this hive of activities ended up with a national recount. And when that was completed, we had a law and field saga to deal with. And then we had the more court proceedings until the results were finally declared. There was non-stop work, night and day during that period. That filing of that defense really slipped through the crack, and that's the truth. And the rules of court provide that default judgments can be set aside. And we are making an application to set it aside. What is strange, though, is that we were not notified. Normally, the court would send notices to parties to remind them, especially during the COVID time. A judge listening to this application, and this judgment was granted in March 2021, a year after the default, March 2021. A judge is hearing this application, is seeing my name on the record, knows that I am the Attorney General, knows that Mr. Jagdev is the Vice President, and still would not notify us. We are not hard to locate. Normally, and I have to be very careful what I say. Normally, in those circumstances, an application of that type is ordered to be served before default judgment is obtained. Because the overriding objective of the rules of court and of the system of justice is not to shut people out, is not to penalize persons for disobedience of rules, but to allow cases to be heard and determined on their merits so that justice can be done between the parties. The courts do not exist to punish persons for technical breaches of rules and for an error that a lawyer may make or a litigant may make. Courts don't exist to do that. Court exists to do justice between parties. So, in my view, there are exceptional circumstances here that ought to compel the exercise of a discretion to have this judgment recalled and allow Mr. Jagdev an opportunity to file his defense. And we are vigorously pursuing that application to have this judgment recalled and get permission to file a defense and let the case be heard on its merits. The same way, I see people making comparison with President Ramotar libel case and Glenn Lyle. There is no basis for comparison. That case went to trial. Both parties were in court. Both parties filed their papers. Both parties went into the witness box. And judgment was granted after hearing both sides. Judgment here is being granted without hearing one side. And what is significant is that $20 million was assessed as damages without no assessment being done based upon the record. I got the record of the court and I'm looking at the record of the court, And assessment of damages is normally done by putting someone in the witness box and taking oral testimony from them in relation to the damage and loss that they suffered as a result of the wrong committed against them. Here and in those cases, the other side is entitled as of right to cross examine that witness and to be able to interrogate that evidence. Here the evidence seemed to not to have been led. So I don't understand a judge seemed to have sat by herself and determined $20 million just like that. In my respectful view, that is an arbitrary award. It's not based upon evidence. It's not based upon the principles of law that govern assessment of damages. And the rules of court say that even if you don't have a defense on the record, and once that type of hearing takes place, you must be invited, and that hearing must take place. So Mr. Jagdeo should have been invited to participate and interrogate the witness when that witness went into the witness box, even though he doesn't have a defense on the record. All those rules were violated. So, in my respectful view, I think that a good case is being made out and will be made out for the judgment to be set aside and for the case to be heard on its merits, because that is the policy of courts. I don't think our court will do any other thing in this matter, but we have to keep our fingers crossed and we have to prosecute this filing of the rehearing application, as it is called, for the matter to be reheard. And that is where we are going. And that's what we are preparing now so that the parties can get justice. So I ask persons to be intelligent and to try to understand and don't fall victim to hysteria. I understand there is great hysteria, pandemonium and celebration on Facebook and elsewhere. Well, they don't have anything much to celebrate. They don't normally win a case, and they have not won this on merit. They won this by themselves. They won this behind the back of the other side. This is not a victory. This is simply a technical setback, which I assure you, every effort will be made to have it rectified so that justice can prevail in the end. And so that is what we are pursuing in relation to that matter. So all the pandemonium and the celebration and the hysteria that you're seeing manifesting itself is going to be short-lived. Don't bother with that. By tomorrow, the following day, we will be in court and we will have our day in court as well. And you know we don't normally lose cases, but I don't want to be I don't want to be accused of being boastful or anything like that. I'm just speaking the facts. So that is where we are on that issue. Today we had a very important engagement, myself and the Ministry of Trade, and it goes to show again our government's approach when there is a problem. And there has arisen a problem in trade in Guyana, in particular trade between Guyana and the state of Florida. It's not a new issue. It's an issue that has been on the front burner for 5 years, but while we were in opposition, it was completely not addressed. And we have decided as a government to tackle it. And the issue has to do with the importation of goods into Guyana from Florida. Apparently, a few years ago, Florida changed its state's law, and the federal department no longer issues what is called a free sale certificate, which is a document which is required when you are exporting goods, and the importing country requires that as a form of certification. Florida, the federal department in Florida no longer performs that function and has divested that responsibility to a company called Florida Enterprise, which seems to be a private company. The Ministry of Health or the Department of Health in Florida also has certain responsibilities in terms of certifying goods, in particular food, for export out of Florida, which the importing country accepts as certifying records. Also, the Department of Agriculture in Florida does some kind of responsible actions as well. And these documents that are issued, they form the basis in Guyana for the Food and Drugs Department to conclude that these goods are of acceptable standards. So, however, all these responsibilities are now being performed by an organization called Florida Enterprise or Enterprises. And the Food and Drugs Department has not been accepting that certificate issued by Florida Enterprise as an acceptable documentation for goods to be imported into Guyana. And that has put a large number of small businesses in jeopardy. In fact, they can't import anymore, they are in financial crisis, they have closed down many branches, it has led to laying off of staff, and this is going on for 5 years. So the government decided to tackle this head on with some assistance from the US Embassy here. And we had an engagement today. As you know, our government does not act in a unilateral, high-handed, arrogant manner. We bring the parties together. So we brought the Ministry of Trade, the Ministry of Legal Affairs, the Ministry of Health, under which the Food and Drug Department falls, and the entire business community. And we had a very frank discussion on how to go forward. Government does not want to take a particular position. Our position as a government is that we want hassle-free trade in our country. We want our private sector to get fair opportunities. We want people to have the widest variety of goods at the cheapest possible price. On the other hand, we don't want Guyana to become a dumping ground. We want to maintain acceptable international standards for goods coming into our country. So right there you have competing interests, because the Food and Drugs Department is contending that if you accept this type of certification from Florida Enterprises, then you are compromising quality control. And those who are in possession of this document is saying that they can't get any other document for goods from Florida, because this is the authorized agency in Florida if you want to import goods from Florida to Guyana. And no matter what they try, this is what they end up with, this certificate. And if the Guyana authorities are not going to accept it, then we are going to have serious problems. So we had this engagement, and I believe that we have come to a particular compromise, but I am not at liberty to disclose that as yet, because the process is subject to the approval of Cabinet. And Cabinet will have to determine whether they accept what we have arrived at that confabulation. But I gave you an example to bring you up to date, business community up to date, and that we are not sitting idly by and allow this issue to fester, that the government is taking an aggressive approach on this matter, and that we will endeavor to address it in a way that is satisfactory to the Food and Drugs Authority as well as the business community. We have to find a compromise, because there are too many businesses who are affected and too many lives that are affected by this trade between Guyana and the state of Florida. So we are dealing with that issue head on, and hopefully we bring a resolution to it shortly. Well, we just came out of Pagua celebration, and as you know, um, I see we did not celebrate it in the manner that we normally would because of COVID pandemic. I saw a person saw me celebrating Pagua without a mask on, but that's okay. And they criticized me for that. Perhaps I deserve the criticism, but I have received my injection, and we really take off the masks for the purpose of the photographs. Um, but you get criticized when you do that as well. So, you know, if it is that we behaved irresponsibly, then I apologize for that. That should not have happened. We should always have our masks on. I have my mask always. I try to have my mask on, but to err is human, and I don't pretend to be perfect. I don't pretend to perfection. I don't pretend to be perfect. And if I err, then I apologize and we move on. But we are aggressively pursuing a national vaccination campaign. I had at my outreach in Annandale over 200 persons, 60 years and over, who were vaccinated with the AstraZeneca vaccine. And we are going to, as the president announced, I think from this week, we are going to deal with 40 years and above. So we are gradually getting there. We got a whole shipment, another shipment of, I think, Covax this time out of India, and that will soon be distributed by vaccination right across the country. So I think that we are doing very, very well with our vaccination program. I think we are doing better than most territories in the Caribbean. We have a very aggressive drive, and if we continue this way, everything should be okay. But the statistics are still there, and they're still worrying. People are still dying, and the pandemic, therefore, is still on, and we have to be careful. I want to address a persistent issue also as I'm speaking on my outreach, and it is that every week persons complain that I only visit Annandale. Now, and that I only look after and deal with the people of Annandale. Let me explain for the 10th or 15th time that I do not only deal with or see the people of Annandale. Annandale is simply the meeting place. I could have done it in Georgetown and I would have been seeing less people. Annandale is much more accessible to the ordinary people. Ministers do it at different locations. I am not going to travel every village a different week. I am not going to do that. I don't have the energy, I don't have the facility for that. I sit at Annandale, that is the meeting point only. And persons travel from right across the country and they come there. People come from Essequibo, people come from Bartica, people come from Berbice, people come from Linden, and they all come there. I have a whole staff who are there with me. I have persons from the RDC, I have persons from the NDC, I have persons from my ministry, I have persons from NIS, I have persons from Ministry of Housing sometimes. I can't caravan all these people across the country. Please understand that. But at least I am there in Annandale where people can come and see me. I also have visited other areas and will continue to do so once time permits. So I spent an entire weekend on the Essequibo coast where I had visits and I had meetings and outreaches right across the coast from one end to the next, from Charity all the way to Supana. And at periodic intervals, I will do that. I will go in Berbice and I will spend time. I will go to Region 5 and I will spend time. I will go to other regions. But please understand that the area that I will meet every time, every week, is Annandale. And the persons who are seeing me at Annandale are not persons from Annandale alone. They are persons who come there right across the country, from all walks of life, from every ethnic group. Look at the photographs that I'm posting. And that is why I am posting those photographs, so that persons can see that you think all those people, I see 200 persons every Saturday, you think all of them live in Annandale? I would have been seeing the same people all the time because I've been doing this now since August or thereabouts. So it is not so. It is that I am using that as the base of the meeting point. That's all I am doing. And persons can come there and see me. And until I get time to go to other places, I will be seeing people at that location. And I must say that the response has been good, and I encourage persons to come more and to come out more and come and visit me there. I may not be able to address all the issues that you raise. However, I am able to guide you in the right direction. Do you know how many people's problems I have solved? NIS, water problem, electricity problem, and the amount of legal advice that I have given is enormous, because that is what people need the most, I think, in this country. Legal advice, guidance to deal with their matters. People really need a lot of legal help in this country. And that is why we really have to build a legal aid clinic in Guyana. So in terms of politics, well, I don't see any much development. The opposition is as lackluster as usual, incompetent as usual. All they do is continuing to criticize and not making any constructive comments. I see Mr. Harman's appeal to Prime Minister of Trinidad and Tobago that the president is not speaking with him has fallen on deaf ears, and rightfully so. Why would the president of Trinidad and Tobago get involved in a petty issue like that? Mr. Harman, the president has made it very clear. I will engage you once you show me some respect and you recognize my legitimacy. If you don't recognize that I am the president, why am I going to engage you? So you can go around gallivanting around the place and call me an illegal president. You go ahead and do that. I will not meet with you. It's as simple as that. If he wants serious engagement, then he has to behave himself. He has to behave responsibly. We are not going to meet. Who are you going to meet? Sherrod Duncan? What sensible conversation are you going to have with him? Look at the behavior of these people. Look at what they say, how they interact, what they post about people on Facebook. They just lurk around to see an error being made. So somebody play Pagua without a mask, and there's a 1 hour program for them. That's all they do. Nuisance value. Nuisance value. How does that help their constituents? Tell me. How does that help anybody by criticizing a minister for not wearing his mask? That helps anybody in Guyana? Other than you're criticizing a minister and maybe you score 1 or 2 political points, bravo for you. How does that advance your political cause? So that's all that they're doing. This weekend, we have another big weekend, a big holiday weekend. We will be celebrating Easter. And again, we are going to have to insist that COVID measures are respected and obeyed. Because you know what happens in Guyana during the Easter holidays. the crowd in the seawall and in open pastures in the vicinity of the seawall and elsewhere are huge and sometimes can become unmanageable. And that is the situation that the government has on its hands. But we have to continue to persevere and we have to continue to manage the environment and manage the pandemic. We just can't throw our hands up in the air, and it's not easy also for persons to to persons find it difficult to operate under the COVID pandemic, and that's why you have so many violations and breaches because people would like to have a good time. They have been under this stress and these restrictions for a very long time. Businessmen and business places are complaining bitterly. The bar owners, every day they come to me, they have a story to tell too. They have to pay rent, some of them. They have to pay their light bills. They have to pay their phone bills. They have to pay their staff. They have to keep their staff employed. And that is their source of income, that bar. And they can't open it. And this is going on for months and years, a year now. Restaurant owners, this is what the people do to live. They have waitresses, they have staff, they have license fees to pay, they have fixed expenses, they also have to live, they also have to send their children to school. They have no source of income other than these bars, restaurants, and recreation centers. So it's not an easy thing to manage. And we have to strike this balance. And that is what we have been trying to do in government. Maintaining public health standards, but at the same time, not shutting down the country and putting people on the breadline. So when these righteous people mount their high horses and they criticize, they live sometimes in ivory towers. And I hope that I'm not being misinterpreted because I interact with people out there. Shop owners come to me on Saturdays and they sit, delegations of 15 and 20 of them. That's 20 families. And another 20 families sometimes depend upon them. And they tell you, they ask you to explain to them how are they going to live. They have not worked for 6 months. They have not opened a business for 8 months. How do they survive? Where do they get money to pay their light bills, phone bills, send their children to school, feed their children? These are real questions that you in government, us in government, have to answer. So it's not an easy thing to manage an economy with these surviving and competing interests. But we are still doing it. Many countries have taken the other approach, which is shut down completely. We have not done that. We still encourage tourism. We still encourage business. We still encourage people to come to our country because we want to keep the economy going. We want to keep people, we want to keep a constant flow of business in the country going. We want to keep money circulating. And that brings me to the hotels. When these people come to Guyana, they go to a hotel. Now, I'm not defending hotels who are opening beyond the stipulated time. There is a stipulated time, let us say it's 10 p.m., then the hotels must comply with that. Their bars must be closed before 10. But before 10, these hotels have guests. The guests pay to stay at those hotels and to enjoy the facilities of those hotels, which includes a poolside, a pool, a bar, a restaurant, because that's where they live. That is where they live. And you can't fault the hotel operators if they are if those people go down there from the hotel sometimes has 100 guests. The guests now have their family, they have their friends, they invite them to the hotel. They sit at the poolside, they sit at the bar. Where do they go? You can't lock them up in the washroom. You can't lock them as prisoners in their room. They are paying for that. So, again, that balance must be struck. And the hotels have to be distinguished from the bars. Because it's a hotel. It's not people coming off the road. If you come off the road, then you're not supposed to come in, because that is against the COVID rules. But if you are a guest of the hotel, you can invite a friend. And you must be able, as a guest of the hotel, to be able to enjoy the facilities of the hotel, unless you're going to a prison. So everyone, there are different competing interests that we have to try to balance. People love this country from North America. Guyanese come back here all the time. I had at my outreach Terry Gadraj, Abichun Radio, Vishnu Bisram, Bhaskar Sharma. There's about over 10 persons I came to visit me Saturday. They are all staying in hotels in different parts of the country. You think they come here to lock up in a room? No, they come here to enjoy Guyana. Of course, they are subject to the COVID regulations. They are subject to the COVID protocols. But all I am saying is that everyone have to be reasonable in their way of enforcement. Another important development that has taken place in our country over the weekend is the election of members of the Guyana Cricket Board. Now, as you are aware, the Guyana Cricket Board has been mired in controversy for nearly 15 years. We had to go to the Parliament and pass the Cricket Administration Act, and it has been marred in litigation. Persons were holding offices in the Guyana Cricket Board for over 15 years by virtue not of the ballot, by virtue of court orders and court proceedings, which they were able to get from the court system through various initiatives. Well, everything only lasts for a while. And that use of the court system to remain in government or to remain in office came to an end. It would have come to an end. I told the players those who were engaged in that after a while, every rope has an end. And finally, that cricket elections were held, and a new body, elected, democratically so, were installed. A new elected body was installed, presided over by a very competent ombudsman in the form of Kamal Ramkaran, my colleague at the bar, who did an exceptional job. Some parties had asked for an adjournment because they wanted to study something, and he granted their request, and he had postponed the elections because he wanted no one to have a grievance. And I want to salute him for that. He acted fairly, he acted impartially, he acted competently. And the election date was fixed, and the elections were held, and right now there's a body there, and hopefully they will take cricket's welfare as their priority, because many people believe that that was not the priority of those who are in the administration of cricket in Guyana for the longest while. I hope that there is accountability. I hope that there is transparency. I hope that there is responsible administration of cricket in Guyana, because that or those are the expectations after a long hiatus in the wilderness, where all sorts of allegations have been leveled against those who are in charge of our cricket. Finally, the curtains have come down, and that period is now behind us, and we have some fresh blood, some very respectable people, and I hope that they can put their shoulders to the wheel and they can push our cricketing agenda forward. Cricket is an important sport in our country. It is our national sport. It is a unifying, cohesive force in our country, and we sincerely hope that 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 body that has taken over, that body of persons who have taken over the cricket administration, do so, do a good job, and can deliver a better cricketing environment for our young people, so that we can continue to help in our own way to push the West Indies team back to the top of the cricketing ladder. For too long, West Indian cricket has been on the decline. For too long, we have heard about persons who should be selected are not selected, persons who are selected should not be selected, persons are not given a fair chance but they are dropped after one or two bad performances, but other persons who have protracted bad performances or lean performances are still kept on the team. Persons are forced to retire before their retirement is due. Persons who have a lot of years in cricket are squeezed out out of one version of cricket, and others are given an unfair opportunity to remain in cricket for a longer period of time. These inconsistencies, these allegations of discriminatory practices must end. These are the things that have our cricket in the way it is. We have a management problem in the Caribbean in relation to our cricket, and I hope that with the change in Guyana, with the change taking place in Guyana Cricket Board, it can begin an impetus that will see a revolution throughout cricket administration in the Caribbean. We have elections also going to take place, I believe, next month, April the 11th, at the level of the West Indies Cricket Board. I want to hope that those elections are not going to, they have already begun in controversy. Two boards have boycotted. I hope that there is a restoration of normalcy and those elections can be held. Cricket is important not only to Guyana, as I said, but to our West Indian people. I also want to close by congratulating my colleague Minister Charles Ramsden as the subject minister to have pulled off these elections. I salute you, Charles. You did a good job, and hopefully we can get this thing up and running. So those are my brief comments for tonight's program. My operator is signaling to me that I am out of time. So I will see you next week. I will not be seeing you before Easter. So I want to take this opportunity to wish each and every one of you a happy Easter. I want to caution you to please recognize and celebrate your Easter holidays in due recognition of the restrictions imposed by our COVID protocols, and also please ensure that you fly your kites in open spaces and away from electric wires. We do not want any disaster to mar our celebration of the wonderful event of Easter in our country. It's a time where Guyanese of all races, I remember flying kites from the time I could walk. So it's not about Christian, it's not about Afro Guyanese. Our festivals, and that's the beauty of our country, our festivals have all assumed a national flavor, and they have all assumed a national manifestation. So last week we were celebrating Pagua, and you saw Guyanese from all races, not only Hindus and East Indians, but Guyanese from all races celebrating Pagua. And this time around, this weekend, you will see Guyanese from all races again celebrating Easter. That is how we do things in Guyana. I want to take this opportunity to thank you very much for spending the last 55 or so minutes with me. Please enjoy the rest of the evening, enjoy the rest of the week, and enjoy a happy and peaceful Easter. Thank you very much. Stay safe.